Having retired as a sailor over 10 years, 80-year-old Harry Dawson feels he needs to reminisce about his sea adventures, but not in big vessels this time. However, his children are so busy with their work that his wish had to wait a little bit. Fortunately, in the summer of 1952, when he clocked 80, his children granted his wish by arranging a vacation out of the continent for him. He traveled far from Florida to Buka Island in New Papua Guinea with his family, including his grandchildren. Demir couldn't contain his excitement as he packed up his snorkeling gear, which he had used numerous times for practice in Miami Beach during previous vacations. With his snorkeling gear ready, he eagerly boarded the flights to New Papua Guinea. After spending almost a day on the flight, they crashed at a hotel overlooking the Buka beach to rest while awaiting the next day, full of amusement and fun. Harry was even given a choice to choose the place he would love to visit between Africa, Asia, and Oceania, with him choosing the last. So he knew that Buka Island Beach was a great spot to fish and swim, with clear waters offering plenty of snorkeling opportunities. Since Harry's birthday was the next day, a small birthday was thrown at the hotel, which delayed the tourists from going to the beach. During the evening, Harry steps out on the beach feeling the soft, mushy texture of the sand. His two children, Joe and Thomas, and their families also troop out onto the beach with the young children running helter-skelter and throwing sand at each other happily. Harry first lies down beside the water overlooking the waves and taking in the stunning and idyllic waters filled with brilliant aqua and azure hues. He watched on like this for about 30 minutes before he went on to don his snorkeling kit. While Demir sat away from his children and grandchildren, he had already put on his snorkeling gear. However, Thomas noticed this and became concerned. He approached his father and tried to convince him not to venture into the vast water. Still, Harry said he couldn't remove all the kit from himself after completely donning them. He promised that he wouldn't go far. After much persuasion, Thomas volunteered to follow his father. He proceeded to rent a boat equipped with a small engine. Thomas planned to stay on the boat and enjoy some fishing, while his father went snorkeling in the surrounding waters. When the boat reached a little deep in the water, Harry, trying to be young again, dived straight into it like a professional, while Thomas held onto the fishing rod, waiting for prospective victims. Thankfully, the hook caught a fish. After disengaging the fish from the hook and returning to the water, Thomas noted something gliding around in front of him. Without verifying that, he immediately called on his dad, having heard of various shark attacks, and didn't want him to be a victim. However, Harry couldn't hear his son, as he was underwater enjoying his adventure. True to his guess, it was a shark getting attracted to the area in search of its prey. Thomas thinks the shark is still trying to figure out what was on the water before attacking, and shouting his father's name will only attract the fish quickly. So he kept silent while panicking and praying for his dad to rise from the water. He also feared that his dad might have swam far from the boat. Suddenly, he saw a rushing wave approaching the canoe from underneath the ocean. Thinking it was a shark, Thomas quickly started the engine to drive as fast as he could. Meanwhile, Harry was swimming frantically toward the boat with all his strength. Despite being old enough, the grandpa didn't want to die on his birthday. On seeing his dad swimming towards him, Thomas stopped the boat to lend a hand to assist Harry. Immediately, he held Harry's hand and started pulling him up. As the older man kept his left leg in the water, he felt a sense of relief, thinking he was somewhat protected up there. However, his relief was short-lived when suddenly a powerful force yanked him back into the water with a sharp pull. The tiger shark, 8 feet long, clamped its teeth on Harry's ankle, making him release an excruciating cry. Thomas desperately clung to his father's hand, exerting all of his strength to pull him out of the shark's mouth. However, it soon became clear that the shark's grip was too powerful, making it impossible to free his father from its jaws. With experiences he had while sailing, Harry uses his right leg to release kicks on the shark's face and snout. He did this with all his might until the shark released its grip. Thomas, who never left his dad's side, quickly pulled him onto the unbalanced boat. With blood dripping excessively from Harry's ankle, Thomas quickly returned to the engine, but it failed to start. He kicked it several times, but the engine refused to roar. The time wasted provided the shark with another opportunity and took full advantage of it. Charging against the boat, the shark collided with great force. causing the boat to somersault and eject its contents, including the captured fish and the occupants, into the water. As a result of the collision, Thomas and Harry were separated, with Thomas finding himself on the side nearer to the beach, while the injured Harry remained in grave peril in the water. By this time, everyone at the beach was aware of the brawl inside the water. Tourists playing in the shallow parts have all scrambled out while panicking. Everyone was praying for the survival of Dad and son, but no one dared venture in to rescue them. Even Joe couldn't. Sharks are known to get easily attracted to blood, and with blood gushing out of Harry's wound, it isn't difficult to locate. Immediately after the boat capsized, Thomas began swimming frantically toward the bank, believing his dad would do the same. However, Harry couldn't swim well, with one of his legs injured. In no time, the shark caught up with him and swallowed him halfway. From a sharp bite that could crack the skull, his legs to his waist were in the shark's mouth. Harry could do nothing, with much of his energy exhausted from the first attack. He flung his arms around, but they were powerless, intensifying the pain. By the time Harry was about to be chewed in two, Thomas had swum ashore, and with the rest, he watched as the predator was gnashing his father. After the shark swam away, the lifeguards came to rescue Harry's remains. His upper part to his abdomen were recovered, but what good could that do? He was confirmed dead and buried the next day beside the beach, with a huge cenotaph erected. His family, however, said they wouldn't leave the country until the shark was caught, which made the authorities initiate a search, and the shark was located after a day of searching. When it was captured and Harry's remains were found in it, the shark was killed. The remains were buried, and the family flew back to Florida. Although it's saddening, they have to continue living. However, they promise to visit Buka on every anniversary of their father. On Ibiza Beach, a huge sign warns people of shark attacks. It wasn't there until 2002. Rodrigo Alaves was a 25-year-old gym instructor based in the Spanish capital, Madrid. But once in a while, he would visit his mother living in the coastal town of Ibiza. Visiting his mom was even a camouflage, as the main reason he yearned to visit Ibiza was because of its splendid beaches. Since Madrid has no beach, he doesn't have time to travel down to Valencia. So during holidays, he would kill two birds with a stone by visiting his mom and the beach of Ibiza, a long expanse of golden sand, surrounded by a nature reserve including dunes, pine forests, and spectacular salt flats. Rodrigo embarked on a 3.5-hour train journey from Madrid to his hometown. His mother eagerly awaited his arrival and prepared a table with his favorite dishes. She knew that he wouldn't have time to cook while he was in the city. After having lunch and resting, Rodrigo met his childhood friends and prompted them to prepare for a skiing adventure the next day. They partied until late at night, each boasting about defeating the other the next day. Little did they know what would happen. The next day, Rodrigo, having longed to ski, was the first person among the 5 friends to reach the beach. There, he met many tourists enjoying their stay at the beach, playing different games. After a few minutes, each arrived, donned the necessary gear, and headed into the water. It was a warm morning. The sun shone with a slight breeze, which was the perfect day to ski. They first got into the river and skied around the shallow part to get their body in action for the big race. During this time, they splashed water on each other and giggled loudly. After about 50 minutes, they left the heavily populated tourist area and went far into the water before they started to race. They raced several times as none of them wanted to accept defeat. As time passed, they abandoned the race and began trying out skills on the water. Rodrigo shined most during this skill exhibition. He even tried skiing with only one foot, holding onto the rope handle. Rodrigo skips through the water with one foot and treads the water to splash water all over him and his friends. As a professional, he even planks on the water's surface with both legs in the air. Rodrigo then does some push-ups while still speeding through the water. He works out on the water while his friends watch and praise him. During this exhibition, they didn't notice a shark circling the area. The beast might have been disturbed by their incessant splash and noise, so it came to visit them. By the time they noticed, it was too late to take action. The great white shark was speeding with its full strength and attacked Rodrigo, sending him straight into the water. The others quickly scampered through the water to save their lives. They'd forgotten that someone was left with the shark. He would never forget the agonizing sensation of the shark's bite on his leg. Rodrigo tried to break free from the shark's grip, but it wasn't easy. The shark was about 8 feet long with very sharp teeth, with which it clamped onto Rodrigo's calf and pulled him underneath the water. Before pulling him into the water, Rodrigo could catch a glimpse of the shark despite excruciating pain. The sight of the massive predator was enough to send shivers down his spine. As he was pulled below the waves, he fought hard to remember the advice he had heard about surviving a shark attack. To fend off the shark, he tried to aim for its nose and left eye with punches. However, unable to reach those targets, he resorted to striking the shark's gills instead. After the shark dipped in and out of the water twice, his hand hit the shark's snout. Packing the remaining energy into his fist, he started hitting it severely, not minding how the predator was gnashing his flesh. As blood oozed from his wounds, the color of the water transformed, yet this didn't dissuade Rodrigo from persevering in his efforts to free himself. Fortunately for him, the shark loosened its grip. He didn't wait for it to relaunch its attack as he swam out of the shark's jaw. Rodrigo had difficulty swimming ashore because of his mangled leg, but he didn't dare to stop because he wasn't out of danger yet. He was still in open water, 200 yards from the safety of the shore. Rodrigo began to swim as he could towards the shore, panicking, knowing that the shark might follow, the blood gushing from his crushed leg. 40 yards from the shore, a wave suddenly lifted him, landing him on the shore. Thinking it was the shark again, Rodrigo was so scared that he had left his fate to the grim of the predator, but thankfully he was safe. Tourists having fun on the beach quickly circled him, and medical attention was called. The emergency responder administered first aid to him before transporting him to the hospital. Rodrigo was alert during this trip, groaning as the pain surged into him, but at the same time, grateful that he survived the attack. He spent a month in the hospital, where skilled doctors operated on him, and with his leg damaged beyond repair, they had no choice but to amputate it. Some weeks after the amputation, Rodrigo left the hospital with new prosthetics. His dream of being a renowned gymnast was dashed, but he held his head high and with his spirit unfazed to face the challenges of his new self. But never would he visit any beach to have fun again. Henry Weigel was a professional Danish tennis player who promised his children, especially his 12-year-old son Levi, that he would treat them to some unforgettable experiences if he did well in his exams. With this promise, Levi burned the midnight candle to deliver an excellent result to his dad. He beamed with joy as his dad congratulated him on his amazing feat. Fortunately, Henry qualified for the 2007 Australia Open, scheduled in South Australia. So Levi, obsessed with kayaking back in Denmark lakes, South Australian beaches would give him the new opportunity to kayak as much as he wanted. Although Henry is out in a competition, tennis players could also tour around the cities they are in to compete and enjoy the city's culture, landscape, and beaches. Port Elliot Beach in South Australia was the closest to the competition arena, so Henry lodged at a hotel near the beach with his son and 10-year-old daughter Maria, since he was a single father. Upon arriving at the town and lodging in the hotel around 3 p.m., the trio trooped to the beach to take in the fresh air. But to their chagrin, they met a multitude of tourists also having fun at the beach. The beach buzzed with great coffee shops, organic restaurants, and many local pop-ups. Part of the sandy area by the beach was also filled up with young hip crowds, sprawled out on their picnic blankets and sipping on cider while listening to pop-up live bands. The family set up a small picnic mat and had lunch before Harry lay on a beach chair overlooking the sea's serene atmosphere and bluish water. He intermittently sipped on a cup of coffee he bought after eating. Unable to stay still like his father, Levi and Maria ventured into the water to engage in playful activities, accompanied by a warning to stay within a safe distance and not wander too far. They chased each other while splashing water on themselves as they giggled excitedly. Henry just watched from afar and smiled. After a while, Maria suggested that they play beach ball, and she went in to get it from a nearby shop. Staying at the side nearer to the bank, she threw the ball at Levi, who reciprocated by throwing it back to her. The game started earnestly, and they visibly enjoyed the adventure with their dad watching from afar. They enjoyed this game and didn't notice the dorsal fin gliding up to them. Maria threw the ball towards Levi for the 100th time, and the wave maneuvered it so he couldn't catch it. With the ball floating on the water, Levi swam over to pick it up. As he dipped his hand into the water, he cried, alerting his dad. Henry thought the boy was shouting out of fun, but when the water around him turned red, he knew he was in grave danger. He quickly calls on Maria to come ashore and grabs a club lying on the beach. A ferocious bull shark clamped onto Levi's arm. Initially feeling the intense pressure, he instinctively attempted to pry it off. However, his efforts only revealed the true horror: a tenacious 8-foot-long shark securely fastened to his arm. One might not realize the love he has for his son until something terrible happens. Henry exhibited astonishing bravery as he swam towards his son. He saw the predator's teeth clamped around his son's arm. Levi was screaming, "Get it off me," to his dad, and "Let me go," to the shark, and blood pumping out of the bite. Henry sprung into action and hit the shark's head with his club. The shark wiggled, trying to take the arm as his prize, but Henry didn't want that to happen. He kept hitting the predator's head while it kept gnashing at the preteen's arm. Henry didn't want to let go, but he noticed that his hits didn't produce much result on the shark, so he targeted the eyes with a resounding blow. The shark recoiled, but it still held on to the kid's arm. Another blow sent it back into the abyss while holding Levi's arm. It ripped it out of his body. Harry carried the injured child to the shore and gave him a heart massage, as he had lost almost all of his blood during the struggle. An ambulance was immediately called, and Levi was transported to a nearby hospital. After the boy was safely transported, Harry went back to the water with a lifeguard, determined to get back his child's missing arm. After circling the water thrice with a huge chunk of fish as bait, the shark was discovered, and Henry jumped at it and wrestled it to the shore. There, a national park ranger shot the shark thrice in the head to kill it. Henry used a knife to pry the shark's mouth open and slit its throat so the lifeguard could receive the arm from down the shark's throat. The arm was immediately packed in ice and driven to the hospital. After administering medical aid to him, Levi was transported to a huge hospital in Sydney to get his arm reattached. Fortunately, it was reattached after 3 surgeons worked for 12 hours non-stop to stitch it back on. Henry's astonishing bravery paid off as his son survived, and his arm was reattached. He was, however, on vigil throughout the operation process. He couldn't even participate in the Open, scheduled 2 days after the attack, and had to call the competition officials to inform them about the incident. He stayed beside his son till he could walk out of the hospital, hale and hearty. The stitches on his arm would always remain fresh in his memory, but the incident didn't stop Levi from having fun at the beach, though he seldom ventures into the water.